Now again, don't we kind of discover in this text, and we found this already along Route 66, we've witnessed this many other times in the passage, that it's the lowly servant who understands about real power. It's just like the lady, the gal who was in his wife's court, apparently, the unnamed, unknown servant, she knew what to do. And this unnamed, unknown aide-de-camp, the attending the servant of the commander, is the one that knows that there's some real power that belongs to God. Have you noticed that the servants in the story they always seem to have kind of a clue what's going on? Maybe that's because they haven't been so successful that it clouds their vision of the extraordinary power of God. Yeah. If I'd been asked to do something difficult, I'd have done it, wouldn't you? Chimed the servant. Of course we would. I mean, we're good at difficult things. I'm looking at a lot of people who are good at difficult things. I mean, after all, isn't that how you've gone up the rungs of your career ladders? Isn't that how you've built your reputation? I mean, after all, isn't that how you've raised your children? By doing the really difficult things? I mean, it's a hard task, but if there's somebody that's going to come forward and do it, I'm the person. If it's hard, then put me into it. But there is nothing more difficult than simple, uncomplicated, straightforward faith. Faith that calls you to believe the message that salvation begins with God's words. Nothing more difficult. And as the story kind of illustrates, that's basically all we have is a message. That's all we have is a message. That's all we have in this place. There's nothing magic going on in this house or wherever this church meets, any more than there was at Elisha's house. Many times people come to me as a minister and they begin to tell me the stories of their broken bodies. They tell me the stories of their broken hearts. They tell me about their children who at times have broken spirits. And many times I hear about broken relationships based on broken promises. And because I love you as I do, I wish I had some magic. I wish that I could wave my hand over it and make it disappear. Oh, yes, I do. But I'm just like Elisha's servant. All I have every week, and any time you talk to me, is a message. I'm just like the servant. And my message is, your life is special. You are special. Not because of how you've exerted yourself, but simply because you believe in God. However, believing doesn't mean you can't get hurt. And in this life, we are never more than ordinary. When Nancy and I lived in Iowa, we used to route our daily walk through a cemetery. I guess I was struck by the irony of doing that. There we were doing everything we could to get as healthy as we could, past grave markers that would remind us of our inevitable end. But you know, the more that I've come to the terms with being ordinary, and for those of you who know me well, I am ordinary, I've learned to enjoy it. And I'm really not sure why that is. But I think it has something to do with being able to enjoy how extraordinary God is. We have, Paul said, we have this treasure in clay pots. The treasure is in clay pots, he said. And this is so that it might be clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. That means we are not less than ordinary. Hear me clear. We're not less than ordinary. But at the same time, we're not more than ordinary. Not more than ordinary. We're as ordinary as a clay flower pot. And like that little terracotta container, we contain the extraordinary work of God within us. So maybe that's why there is a time that we find brokenness. Maybe that's the point to brokenness. It reminds us that we're not God. And it helps us to see who is extraordinary, knowing that we're not. Now back to the story. My guess is that the servant's scolded Naaman into humbling himself as an ordinary man. Hard to do when you've been commander. He was forced to take another look at those white-tipped fingers. He got another glimpse of his humanity. He decided to turn the chariot around and head toward the Jordan River. You know, maybe he was thinking, if nothing else, how silly it's going to be to walk into the house and then tell the wife, honey, I'm home. And she goes, what happened? And he tells her, and she goes, what? You got that close? You were in Judea and you didn't go down to the water? So he's heading down there. Now, I need you to do something this morning. I need you to hear this story for the first time. I need you to, if you're reading yours, read it for the first time. Imagine reading it for the first time. I'm going to set the scene on the banks of the Jordan River. A proud man is taking off his uniform and he's laying it nicely on a rock. He's taking off all of his campaign buttons one at a time, not ruffling them, laying on his uniform. He's taking off his personal body armor and he stacks it close. He is now making his way reluctantly into the muddy water. He sits down, goes under and dips once, comes up sputtering brown water, and he looks at his hands and his feet. Nothing. One time under, nothing. And I think all the soldiers, though it's not in your Bible, it's in my Bible, all the soldiers are standing around and they're just trying not to laugh. Maybe Naaman even cursed before he went under the second time twice. Nothing. By the third time, he's ready to forget it. But he looks up at one of his valets, and the valet's holding up 7 fingers. So he goes down again. 4. Down again, 5. He goes under once more, 6. And still nothing. Nothing. But then after the 7th time, we're told that he emerged with skin like he had had when he was a young boy. And I think that's when the soldiers stopped laughing, and I think that's when Naaman's heart also stopped for a moment. And he believed in Yahweh God. Now, I think many of you are familiar with this story. Yeah, you're comfortable with this story. You're good with it. You read it this week in your Bible reading plan that we've been providing, and you knew this was where the sermon was going to come. Most drama is here in the 5th chapter. And you're comfortable with this all the way back to probably when maybe you were in Awanas, or maybe a Sunday school, or for some of us in a Catholic school. Whatever your tradition, you are comfortable with this story. Maybe a parent read it to you in Egermeyer's Bible storybook. Yeah, it's in there. And you remember this, and you're comfortable with it. I've got to tell you, I think this story is a bit bizarre. And I'm going to seem like I'm going off the deep end, but to me this week, I think this story seems strange. I think this story is a little ridiculous, excuse me. And if I can be so bold as to say it, I think it's a little absurd. Absurd. Of all of the people for God to be concerned about, Naaman is a successful Syrian general, Please remember, Syria is Israel's northern neighbor in whom she has recently been at war with. This is an enemy of Israel. I mean, after all, if you're looking at verse 2, what were you thinking about the how and the where of the young Israelite slave being found that was brought into Naaman's house? How do you think that happened? It came from the Syrian raiding parties that were performing border excursions over into Israel. And of all of the concerns for God to be concerned about, one person's leprosy, it's rampant at the time. And then of all the people, an adversary, and I got to tell you, a successful adversary at that. Had Naaman been an Israelite, he might never have been cured